The morning sun cast long shadows across the desert floor as Ayana knelt beside the small creek, her weathered hands carefully gathering medicinal plants. At 62, she had spent decades learning the healing ways of her Apache ancestors, though the modern world had pushed many of her people away from such traditions. Her gray hair, streaked with silver, was braided with small stones and feathers that her grandmother had once worn. The desert was quiet except for the gentle babbling of water over rocks and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. She had been living alone in this remote canyon for 3 years now, ever since her husband passed away. The small adobe house her grandfather built still stood strong against the elements, its thick walls keeping the interior cool even during the hottest summer days. Ayana had chosen solitude not out of bitterness, but from a deep calling to preserve the old ways of healing that seemed to be disappearing with each passing generation. Her days followed a peaceful rhythm. She would rise before dawn to gather herbs, spending hours walking the familiar trails that wound through the canyon. Each plant had its purpose, its season, its proper way of being harvested and prepared. The white sage for cleansing ceremonies, the desert willow bark for pain relief, the creosote bush for infections. These were lessons passed down through generations of Apache women, knowledge that lived in her hands as much as in her mind. The sound of approaching footsteps on the rocky path made her look up from her work. It was unusual for anyone to venture this deep into the canyon, especially at this early hour. Ayana rose slowly, her knees protesting after kneeling by the water for so long. Through the morning mist, she could make out the figure of a man walking toward her, his movements careful and deliberate. Even from a distance, she could tell he was Apache by the way he moved through the landscape, reading the terrain with the instincts of someone raised in this harsh but beautiful country. As he drew closer, Ayana could see that he was younger than herself, perhaps in his 40s, with the lean build of someone who spent his days outdoors. His dark hair was pulled back simply, and his clothes were practical. Worn jeans, boots built for walking rough ground, and a faded shirt that had seen many days under the desert sun. But what caught her attention most was the expression on his face. It was the look of a man carrying a burden too heavy for one person to bear. "Grandmother," he said when he reached her, using the respectful term for an elder woman, though they were not related. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "I am Nalnish from the White Mountain Apache. I have been searching for someone with your knowledge." Ayana studied his face, noting the lines of worry around his eyes and the tension in his shoulders. She had seen this look before in others who came seeking her help. It was the expression of someone who had tried everything else and was now turning to the old ways as a last resort. "What brings you to my canyon, Nalnish?" she asked, her voice gentle but direct. She had learned long ago that people in desperate situations appreciated honesty more than empty comfort. He hesitated for a moment, his gaze moving from her face to the plants she had been gathering, then back again. "My daughter," he said finally. "She is 7 years old and she has been sick for many months. The doctors in Phoenix cannot find what is wrong with her. They have done many tests, given her many medicines, but she only grows weaker." Ayana felt her heart tighten with sympathy. Children were precious beyond measure, and their suffering was perhaps the hardest thing for any healer to witness. She had seen too many little ones brought to her over the years. Some she could help, others she could not. Each case taught her something new about the limits and possibilities of traditional healing. "Tell me about her sickness," Ayana said, settling herself on a flat boulder beside the creek and gesturing for him to sit as well. "Start from the beginning, and do not leave out any details, no matter how small they might seem." Nalnish sat down across from her, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. For a moment he seemed to struggle with where to begin. "Her name is Siala," he said at last. "It means little star in our language. She has always been bright and full of energy, like a spark of fire, but 6 months ago she began to have terrible dreams at night, dreams that made her scream and wake up in cold sweats." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "At first my wife and I thought they were just nightmares that children sometimes have. But they grew worse, and during the day, Siala began to seem distant, as if part of her was somewhere else. She would stare at empty corners of rooms and talk to people who were not there." Ayana listened carefully, her experienced mind already beginning to sort through possibilities. In Apache tradition, such symptoms could indicate many different things, from spiritual imbalance to the presence of negative energies. but she needed to hear more before she could begin to understand what might be affecting this child. The doctor said it might be a psychological condition, Nalnish continued, his voice heavy with frustration. They gave her medicines to help her sleep, medicines to calm her mind, but nothing worked. If anything, the medicines seemed to make her more distant from us. She stopped eating well, stopped playing, stopped laughing. It is as if something is slowly stealing her spirit away. As he spoke, Ayana could hear the pain of a father watching his child suffer and being powerless to help her. She had seen this same anguish in the faces of countless parents over the years. Modern medicine, for all its advances, sometimes missed the deeper connections between spirit, mind, and body that traditional healers understood. "Where is your daughter now?" Ayana asked. "With my wife in our home near White River," Nalnish replied. "I told them I was going hunting, but really I have been traveling for days, asking other Apache people if they knew of someone who still practiced the old healing ways. 3 different people told me about you, said you lived in this canyon and that you had helped their families when nothing else could." The weight of his trust and desperation was not lost on Ayana. She understood that coming to seek her help had likely been a difficult decision for him, one that might have caused conflict in his family or community. Many Apache people had conflicted feelings about traditional healing, caught between respect for their ancestors' wisdom and pressure to embrace only modern medical approaches. "I cannot promise that I can help your daughter," Ayana said honestly, "but I am willing to try. The old ways sometimes reach places that modern medicine cannot touch, just as modern medicine can sometimes accomplish things that traditional healing cannot. The wise healer knows when to use each approach." Relief flooded Nalnish's face, and for the first time since he had arrived, some of the tension left his shoulders. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. "First, you must bring her to me," Ayana said. "I cannot properly understand what is affecting her spirit without seeing her myself. The desert can be a place of healing, away from the distractions and negative influences that might be present in more populated areas. But this is a decision you must make with your wife. She must agree to this or the healing cannot begin." 3 days later, Nalnish returned to the canyon, but this time he was not alone. Ayana heard the sound of a truck engine struggling up the rough desert road that led to her home, followed by the slam of doors and quiet voices. She had been preparing for their arrival, gathering additional herbs and preparing the small guest room where the family could stay during the healing process. Through her window, she watched as Nalnish helped a woman and a small child out of an old pickup truck. The woman moved with the careful steps of someone who had been carrying worry for too long, her dark eyes constantly checking on the little girl beside her. This had to be Nalnish's wife, and Ayana could see immediately where the child got her delicate features and expressive eyes. But it was Siala who captured Ayana's attention completely. The 7-year-old was thin, almost fragile-looking, with long black hair that hung limply around her shoulders. Her skin had a pale, unhealthy cast that spoke of too many sleepless nights and too little appetite. Most troubling of all was her expression, or rather the lack of one. The child's face was blank, her eyes unfocused, as if she was looking through the world rather than at it. As they approached the house, Ayana noticed something else that made her heart heavy with concern. Siala walked like an old person, each step carefully measured as if she wasn't entirely sure the ground would be there to catch her foot. For a child who should have been running and playing, this careful, disconnected movement was deeply troubling. Ayana opened her door before they could knock, offering the traditional greeting in Apache before switching to English. "Welcome to my home," she said warmly, though she kept her voice calm and gentle. "I am honored that you have made this journey." Nalnish's wife stepped forward, her hand protectively on Siala's shoulder. "I am Chenoa," she said, her voice carrying both politeness and a hint of skepticism. "Thank you for agreeing to see our daughter. I must admit I am not sure what to expect from this." Ayana appreciated the woman's honesty. Doubt was natural, especially for parents who had already been disappointed by so many failed attempts to help their child. "Uncertainty is understandable," Ayana replied. "All I ask is that you give the healing process a chance to work. Sometimes the old ways take time to show their effects." She knelt down to Siala's level, studying the child's face with the careful attention of someone trained to see beyond the obvious. The little girl did not acknowledge her presence, her gaze remaining fixed on some invisible point in the distance. When Ayana gently spoke her name, there was no response, no flicker of recognition or interest. "How long has she been like this?" Ayana asked. rising to address both parents. "The disconnection started about 2 months ago," Chenoa replied, her voice tight with barely contained emotion. "At first she would still respond when we called her name, but it was as if she had to come back from somewhere far away. Now most days it is as if she cannot hear us at all." Nalnish shifted uncomfortably, his hands clenched at his sides. "The doctors say her hearing is fine, that all her physical responses are normal. They cannot explain why she seems so far away from us." Ayana nodded, her mind already working through the possibilities that traditional Apache healing recognized. In their understanding, the spirit could become displaced or weakened by various causes: trauma, negative energies, spiritual imbalance, or sometimes the calling of deceased relatives who wanted the person to join them in the spirit world. Each cause required a different approach to healing. "Come inside," she said, leading the family into her home. "You must be tired from the journey, and Ciala needs rest before I can begin to understand what is affecting her." The interior of Ayana's house was simple but comfortable, decorated with traditional Apache crafts and filled with the subtle scents of sage and other healing herbs. Bundles of dried plants hung from the wooden beams, and shelves lined the walls, holding jars of various powders and tinctures that she had prepared over the years. Chenoa looked around with obvious curiosity, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. "It is beautiful," she said sincerely. "It feels peaceful here." "The canyon has always been a place of healing," Ayana explained, settling them at her kitchen table while she prepared tea. "My grandmother brought me here as a child and taught me that the desert spirits are strong in this place, but they are also gentle with those who come seeking help." As she moved around the kitchen, Ayana kept watching Ciala from the corner of her eye. The child sat exactly where her parents had placed her, not moving, not looking around, not showing any curiosity about her new surroundings. It was deeply unnatural behavior for a 7-year-old, and it confirmed Ayana's growing suspicion that this was not simply a medical condition. "Tell me about the day the dreams started," Ayana said, placing steaming cups of herbal tea in front of the parents. "Was there anything unusual that happened before that? A visit to a particular place, contact with someone new, any kind of frightening experience?" Nalnish and Chenoa exchanged glances, a look that suggested they had discussed this question many times before. "We have gone over that day hundreds of times," Chenoa said. "It was just an ordinary day. We went to the grocery store in the morning, visited my mother in the afternoon, came home and had dinner. Nothing seemed different or unusual." "What about dreams?" Ayana asked. "Has anyone in your family been having unusual dreams lately? Sometimes spiritual disturbances affect more than one person in a household." Both parents shook their heads, but Ayana noticed that Nalnish hesitated slightly before answering. She made a mental note to speak with him privately later. In her experience, people sometimes withheld information that they thought might be irrelevant or embarrassing, not realizing that such details could be crucial to understanding a spiritual problem. "I would like to observe Ciala for the rest of today," Ayana said. "Tomorrow morning, if you are comfortable with it, I will perform a diagnostic ceremony to better understand what is affecting her spirit. It will not harm her in any way, but it may reveal things that are not visible to ordinary observation." Chenoa reached over and took her husband's hand. "What does this ceremony involve?" she asked. "I will burn sacred herbs and use traditional songs to call upon the healing spirits for guidance," Ayana explained. "Ciala will simply need to be present while I work. If there are negative energies affecting her, they may reveal themselves during the ceremony. If her spirit has become displaced, I may be able to see where it has gone." The afternoon passed quietly, with the family settling into the rhythm of Ayana's home. She prepared a simple but nourishing meal, using ingredients known for their healing properties. Throughout the day, she continued to observe Ciala, noting the child's complete lack of response to changes in her environment. What troubled Ayana most was that Ciala did not seem to be suffering. Children affected by physical pain or emotional distress typically showed some signs of discomfort or sadness. But this little girl appeared to exist in a state of complete detachment, as if she was present in body but absent in spirit. As evening approached, Ayana began to prepare for the night ahead. She had learned over the years that spiritual disturbances often intensified after dark, and she suspected that tonight would reveal important clues about what was affecting Ciala. She gathered the materials she would need for protection ceremonies and prepared special herbs that could help shield the family from negative influences while they slept. "Tonight, I want everyone to sleep in the main room," she told the family. "Sometimes it helps to have people close together when dealing with spiritual problems. I will keep watch and observe what happens during the night hours." As darkness fell over the canyon, Ayanna settled herself in a chair near the window where she could see both the sleeping family and the desert beyond. She had spent many nights like this over the years, keeping vigil while healing energies did their work. Tonight, she sensed, would be particularly important. Something about Ciala's condition felt familiar to her, as if she had encountered this type of spiritual displacement before, though she could not yet remember when or where. The night brought revelations that Ayanna had not expected. Around midnight, as she sat quietly watching over the sleeping family, Ciala began to stir restlessly on her makeshift bed. At first, it seemed like normal sleep movement, but gradually the child's breathing became rapid and shallow. Her small hands clenched into fists, and she began to make soft whimpering sounds that gradually grew louder. Ayanna rose from her chair and moved closer, careful not to wake the parents just yet. She had learned that sometimes it was better to observe the full pattern of a spiritual disturbance before intervening. As she watched, Ciala's movements became more agitated, though her eyes remained closed. The child began to speak, but not in English or Apache. The words that came from her lips were in a language that Ayanna had never heard before, yet somehow they filled the room with a sense of ancient sadness. What happened next made Ayanna's breath catch in her throat. As Ciala continued to speak in the unknown language, the temperature in the room began to drop noticeably. The old healer had experienced many supernatural phenomena over the years, but this was something entirely different. The cold was not natural. It felt purposeful, almost intelligent, as if some presence was drawing heat from the air itself. Then Ciala sat up abruptly, her eyes still closed, and turned her face directly toward Ayanna. When she spoke again, it was in perfect Apache, but her voice carried the cadence and wisdom of someone much older than 7 years. "Grandmother of healing," the voice said through Ciala's lips, "I have been waiting for you to see me." Ayanna felt her heart racing, but her years of training kept her calm. She had dealt with spirit possession before, though never in a case involving such a young child. "Who are you?" she asked quietly, not wanting to wake Nalnish and Chinoa until she better understood what they were dealing with. "I am Nasha, daughter of the canyon people who lived here long before your grandfather's grandfather was born," the voice replied. "I died when I was 8 winters old, during the season of great sickness that took many of our tribe." The name meant nothing to Ayanna, but the story was plausible. This canyon had been home to Apache people for countless generations, and there had indeed been times when disease had devastated entire communities. "Why are you speaking through this, child?" Ayanna asked. "Because she heard my crying," Nasha replied through Ciala. "I have been alone in the spirit world for so long, with no one to help me find my way to the place where the other children play. When little Ciala visited the old ruins near her home, she heard my sadness and her kind heart opened to me. But I did not mean to hurt her by sharing her body." Ayanna felt pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. "What ruins?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. There were ancient Apache dwelling sites scattered throughout the region, and some of them were known to harbor spiritual presences. "The stone houses by the red cliff, where the water once ran," Nasha explained. "My people lived there when I was alive. I died there, and my spirit has remained there, waiting for someone to help me." Now Ayanna understood. 6 months ago, Nalnish's family must have visited one of the archaeological sites in the area, possibly on a family outing or educational trip. Ciala, with the natural spiritual sensitivity that some children possessed, had somehow made contact with the lonely spirit of a child who had died there centuries before. "You must release her," Ayanna said firmly but gently. "This little girl has her own life to live. You are slowly taking her spirit into the world of the dead, and that is not right." "I do not want to hurt her," Nasha replied, and now Ayanna could hear the distress in the voice. "I only wanted a friend, someone who could see me and hear me. I have been so alone for so many seasons that I forgot the difference between the living world and the spirit world." At that moment, Nalnish stirred and opened his eyes. When he saw his daughter sitting up, apparently talking to Ayanna, he started to rise. But Ayanna held up a hand to stop him, mouthing the word "wait" and pointing to Chinoa, who was still sleeping. She needed to handle this delicate situation without causing panic. Nasha, Ayana said, her voice taking on the authoritative tone she used in her most serious healing work. I understand your loneliness, and I will help you find your way to the spirit world where the other children are waiting. But you must release Ciala completely. You must stop sharing her body and let her spirit return fully to the living world. How do I know you will truly help me? The child spirit asked through Ciala. Others have promised to help me before, but they were frightened when they felt my presence and they ran away. Ayana understood the spirit's fear of abandonment. Loneliness could drive even benevolent spirits to desperate actions. Because I'm not afraid of you, she said simply. I have been talking to spirits for more years than you were alive in your human body. I know how to help you cross over properly, but I cannot do it while you are possessing this child. Nalnish was now fully awake and listening intently, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and amazement. Ayana could see that he was struggling to understand what was happening, but also that some part of him had suspected that his daughter's condition was beyond ordinary medical explanation. If I let her go, will I disappear again? Nasha asked, and now the voice carried the plaintive fear of a lost child. No, Ayana promised. I will begin the crossing ceremony tomorrow at dawn. You will be able to see and hear everything, and I will not rest until you are safely with your ancestors in the spirit world. But first you must give Ciala back to her family. For a long moment the room was silent except for the sound of desert wind outside the windows. Then Ciala's body seemed to relax, and when she spoke again, her voice had returned to that of a 7-year-old child. Mama, she said sleepily, her eyes fluttering open for the first time in months with full awareness behind them. Where are we? I had the strangest dream about a little girl who was lost. Chenoa woke up at the sound of her daughter's voice, the first time Ciala had spoken directly to her in weeks. The mother's cry of joy and relief filled the small house as she rushed to embrace her child. Nalnish looked at Ayana with an expression of gratitude mixed with continued bewilderment. What happened? He asked quietly. What was that? Your daughter has a gift for seeing into the spirit world, Ayana explained, her voice tired but satisfied. When she visited some old ruins, she encountered the ghost of a child who died long ago. The spirit was lonely and attached itself to Ciala, not meaning to harm her but not understanding that possession of the living can be dangerous. She moved to the window and looked out at the pre-dawn darkness. The spirit has agreed to release your daughter, but now I must help it cross over to where it belongs. Tomorrow I will perform a ceremony to guide Nasha to the spirit world. It will take most of the day and you will need to keep Ciala close to me during the process. Is she really going to be all right? Chenoa asked, still holding Ciala tightly. Ayana smiled, feeling the exhaustion of the night's work beginning to settle in her bones. The hardest part is over. Your daughter's spirit is strong and healthy. It was just being shared with another spirit who needed help. Once Nasha is properly crossed over, Ciala should return completely to normal. As the first light of dawn began to creep across the canyon walls, Ayana began gathering the materials she would need for what promised to be one of the most complex and important healing ceremonies of her long career. She had helped many spirits find their way to the afterlife over the years, but never one that had been lost for so many centuries. This would require all of her knowledge and experience and the help of every ancestral spirit she could call upon. The dawn ceremony began before the sun had fully risen above the canyon walls. Ayana had spent the early morning hours gathering sacred plants and preparing the ritual space outside her home, creating a circle of stones that had been blessed by generations of her ancestors. The desert air was cool and still, perfect conditions for the delicate work of guiding a lost spirit to its final rest. Ciala sat quietly beside her parents, fully alert and present for the first time in months. The child seemed curious about the preparations, asking questions about the different plants and stones that Ayana arranged with such careful precision. It was a joy for Chenoa and Nalnish to hear their daughter's voice again, to see the spark of intelligence and interest that had been absent for so long. Why is the nice lady gathering all those herbs? Ciala asked her mother, pointing to Ayana as she moved around the ceremony circle. She is going to help the lost little girl you dreamed about, Chenoa explained, still marveling at the simple miracle of having a conversation with her daughter again. The girl needs to find her way home to her family. Ayana heard the exchange and smiled. Children often understood spiritual matters more clearly than adults, accepting the reality of unseen worlds without the skepticism that came with age. "That is exactly right, little star," she said to Ciala. "Nasha has been waiting a very long time to go home to her people." As the sun climbed higher, Ayana began the opening prayers, calling upon her ancestors and the healing spirits to assist in the crossing ceremony. She had performed similar rituals before, but never for a spirit that had been earthbound for centuries. The challenge was immense. Nasha had been separated from the spirit world for so long that she might have difficulty recognizing the path home. The ceremony began slowly, with Ayana burning sage and cedar while chanting traditional songs that were designed to open doorways between the world of the living and the world of the dead. As the sacred smoke rose into the morning air, the temperature around the circle began to drop, just as it had during the night. "She is here," Ayana announced quietly to the family. "Nasha has come to participate in her own crossing ceremony." Ciala suddenly sat up straighter, her eyes focusing on a point just beyond the circle of stones. "I can see her," she said with wonder. "She looks like me, but her clothes are different. And she seems sad, but also happy." Ayana was not surprised that Ciala could see the spirit. Children with her sensitivity often retained the ability to perceive the spirit world even after a possession had ended. "What does she look like, little star?" Ayana asked, wanting to confirm that they were indeed dealing with the same entity. "She has long black hair like mine, but it is braided with small shells and beads," Ciala replied. "Her dress is made from animal skin, and it has pretty patterns sewn on it. She is about my size, maybe a little bigger." The description matched what Ayana would expect from an Apache child who had lived centuries ago. The shells suggested that Nasha's people had traded with coastal tribes, which was consistent with the historical records of Apache trading patterns. These details gave Ayana confidence that she was dealing with an authentic ancestral spirit rather than some other type of supernatural presence. As the ceremony progressed, Ayana began the more complex chants designed to call forth the spirits of Nasha's long-dead family members. This was always the most challenging part of a crossing ceremony, summoning ancestors who had been in the spirit world for so long that they might be difficult to reach from the earthly plane. The air around the circle began to shimmer, as if heat waves were rising from the ground, though the morning was still cool. Both Nalnish and Chanoa gasped as they felt the presence of multiple spirits gathering around them. Even though they could not see these beings as clearly as their daughter could, the spiritual energy was strong enough for anyone to perceive. "There are more spirits coming," Ciala reported, her voice filled with awe. "I can see a woman who looks like Nasha but older, and a man with gray hair. They are reaching out their hands to her." Ayana felt a surge of relief. The most difficult part of the ceremony was working. Nasha's family members were responding to the call, ready to welcome their long-lost daughter home. But now came the delicate task of convincing a spirit who had been earthbound for centuries to finally let go of the physical world. "Nasha," Ayana called out, her voice carrying the authority of a practiced spiritual guide. "Your mother and father are here. They have been waiting for you in the spirit world, wondering what happened to their little daughter." The response came not through Ciala this time, but as a voice that seemed to come from the air itself. It was faint but clear, the sound of a child speaking across an impossible distance. "Mama," the voice said, filled with longing and disbelief. "Is it really you? I have been looking for you for so long, but I could not find the way." "The sickness confused you, little one," came another voice, this one deeper and warmer. "You became lost between worlds, but now the healing woman has shown us how to reach you. Come home to us now." What happened next was one of the most beautiful things Ayana had ever witnessed in decades of spiritual work. The shimmering air around the circle began to coalesce into vaguely human shapes that even the adult eyes could perceive. Ciala laughed with delight as she watched what appeared to be a reunion between the lost child spirit and her long-dead parents. "They are hugging her," Ciala reported joyfully. "Nasha is crying, but she looks so happy. Her mama is telling her that she never stopped looking for her." The family of spirits remained visible for several more minutes, giving Nasha time to reconnect with the parents she had not seen for centuries. During this time, Ayana continued her chants, weaving a spiritual bridge that would allow all of them to return safely to the spirit world together. "Thank you, healing grandmother." Nasha's voice came one last time, now sounding more distant as she prepared to cross over. "Thank you for helping me remember who I am and where I belong. And thank you, little star, for being my friend when I was so alone." "Will I ever see you again?" Ciala asked, and Ayana could hear the genuine affection the child had developed for the lost spirit. "Maybe in dreams sometimes," Nasha replied, her voice now barely audible. "But good dreams, not the scared dreams from before. I will not be sad anymore, so my dreams will be happy." The shimmer in the air began to fade, and the temperature around the circle returned to normal. The presence of spirits grew fainter and fainter until finally the canyon was filled with nothing but ordinary morning sunlight and the sound of birds calling to each other across the desert. Ayana sat back on her heels, feeling the deep exhaustion that always followed a successful crossing ceremony. The spiritual work required tremendous energy, but the satisfaction of helping a lost soul find peace made all the effort worthwhile. "Is it finished?" Nalnish asked quietly. "It is finished," Ayana confirmed. "Nasha is with her family now, in the place where spirits rest. She will not return to trouble the living world." Ciala turned to her parents with a bright smile. "I feel different," she announced, "like I am all here now instead of being split in two pieces. And I am hungry, really, really hungry." Chenoa laughed through tears of relief and joy. Her daughter had not expressed hunger in months. Another sign that the child's spirit had fully returned to the living world. "What would you like to eat, my little star?" she asked. "Everything," Ciala replied emphatically, causing all the adults to laugh. "I feel like I have not eaten in forever." As they prepared to return to the house for a celebratory breakfast, Nalnish approached Ayana with deep gratitude written across his face. "I do not know how to thank you," he said simply. "You gave us back our daughter." Ayana smiled, gathering up her ceremony materials with tired but satisfied movements. "The thanks belong to your daughter," she replied. "Her compassionate heart is what saved both children, the living one and the dead one. Ciala has a rare gift, and someday she may choose to use it to help others as I have helped her." Looking at the little girl who was now chattering excitedly to her mother about all the things she wanted to do now that she felt like herself again, Ayana felt a deep sense of completion. This had been one of her most challenging cases, but also one of her most rewarding. 2 lost children had found their way home. One to the spirit world, and one back to the world of the living. The days following the ceremony were filled with a joy that the family had almost forgotten was possible. Ciala seemed to wake up more fully with each passing hour, as if layers of fog were gradually lifting from her mind and spirit. Her appetite returned with a vengeance, and she delighted in tasting foods that had held no interest for her during the long months of her spiritual displacement. But it was more than just physical recovery that amazed her parents. Ciala's natural curiosity about the world had returned in full force, and she peppered Ayana with endless questions about plants, healing, and the spirit world. The old woman found herself charmed by the child's eager intelligence and genuine interest in traditional Apache ways. "Why do some spirits get lost?" Ciala asked one morning as she helped Ayana gather morning dew from spiderwebs, a traditional ingredient in certain healing preparations. "Sometimes when people die suddenly or tragically, especially children, their spirits become confused," Ayana explained patiently. "They may not understand that they have died, or they may be afraid to cross over to the spirit world alone." Nasha died during a terrible sickness that took many people from her tribe. In all the chaos and sadness, her spirit became separated from her family. Ciala nodded solemnly, carefully collecting the dewdrops in a small glass vial. "I am glad we could help her find her mama and papa again. She was so lonely for such a long time." Watching his daughter's natural empathy and spiritual awareness, Nalnish began to see her experience with Nasha in a different light. What had seemed like a terrible ordeal was perhaps also a revelation of gifts that Ciala possessed. He found himself thinking about his own relationship with traditional Apache culture and wondering if he had been too quick to embrace only modern ways. Ayana, he said one evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset paint the canyon walls in shades of red and gold. Do you think Ciala might have the calling to become a healer like yourself? The old woman considered the question carefully before answering. She has the sensitivity and the compassionate heart that are necessary, she said finally. But the path of a traditional healer is not an easy one. It requires years of learning, great personal sacrifice, and the willingness to carry other people's burdens. Such decisions cannot be made while she is still a child. But if she showed interest as she grows older, Chenoa asked, joining the conversation. Like her husband, she was beginning to see their daughter's spiritual gifts as something valuable rather than frightening. Then I would be honored to teach her, Ayana replied. The old ways are disappearing because fewer young people are willing to learn them. If Ciala chose that path, she could help ensure that traditional healing knowledge survives for future generations. That night, as the family prepared for sleep, Ciala made an announcement that surprised everyone. I want to stay here longer, she declared. I want Ayana to teach me about the plants and the healing songs. Nalnish and Chenoa exchanged glances. They had originally planned to stay only until Ciala was fully recovered, which seemed to have already happened. But they could see the genuine excitement in their daughter's eyes when she talked about learning traditional healing ways. We cannot stay indefinitely, Chenoa said gently. Your father has work to return to and you have school. What if we came back during the summer? Nalnish suggested, surprising himself with the words. I could arrange to take some time off and Ciala could spend a few weeks learning from Ayana. The idea appealed to all of them. Ayana rarely had the opportunity to pass on her knowledge to someone so young and eager to learn. Most people who sought her help were adults dealing with immediate crises, not children interested in long-term study. That would be wonderful, Ayana said, but there is something else to consider. Ciala's gift for seeing spirits means she may encounter other supernatural situations in the future. She should learn how to protect herself and how to help spirits who approach her. This sobered the parents considerably. They had not thought about the possibility that their daughter might face similar challenges again. What kind of protection? Nalnish asked. Spiritual protection, Ayana explained. Prayers, ceremonies, and sacred objects that can shield her from negative entities. And knowledge about how to safely interact with spirits who need help, without putting herself in danger as she did with Nasha. Over the next few days, Ayana began teaching Ciala basic spiritual protection techniques appropriate for a child her age. She showed her how to create simple blessing circles using stones and sage, taught her protective prayers that had been passed down through generations of Apache healers, and gave her a small medicine bag filled with herbs and stones that would help shield her from unwanted spiritual contact. Remember, Ayana told her seriously, your gift is a responsibility. When spirits approach you, they are often desperate and may not understand how their presence affects living people. You must learn to help them while also protecting yourself and your family. Ciala nodded gravely, understanding that her spiritual sensitivity was not just an interesting ability, but something that carried real obligations. Will you teach me how to do the crossing ceremony like you did for Nasha? She asked. Someday when you are older and have learned many other things first, Ayana promised. The crossing ceremony is one of the most advanced skills a healer can learn. It requires not just knowledge, but wisdom and spiritual strength that come only with years of experience. As their extended stay in the canyon drew to a close, the family found themselves reluctant to leave. The peaceful rhythm of life with Ayana had been healing for all of them, not just Ciala. Nalnish had rediscovered his connection to traditional Apache culture. Chenoa had found a mentor figure she had not realized she needed. And Ciala had discovered a passion that might shape the rest of her life. This will always be your home too, Ayana told them as they prepared to depart. The canyon remembers everyone who has been healed here, and it will welcome you back whenever you choose to return. On their last morning, Ciala woke before dawn and found Ayana already outside, gathering herbs in the cool morning air. I want to learn the names of all the plants, the child said determinedly, so I can practice recognizing them at home. Ayana smiled, seeing in the girl's eager face an echo of herself at that age, when her own grandmother had first introduced her to the healing ways. Then we had better get started, she said. There is much to learn before your family leaves today. They spent the morning walking the familiar trails with Ayana pointing out dozens of different plants and explaining their uses. Ciala proved to have an excellent memory, repeating back not just the names but the specific healing properties of each plant they encountered. "You have the mind of a true healer," Ayana told her approvingly. "Knowledge is the foundation of all healing work, and you learn quickly and well." As the sun climbed higher and the time for departure approached, both the old woman and the young girl felt the bittersweet sadness of saying goodbye to someone who had become important to them. But they also felt the excitement of knowing that this was not really an ending, but the beginning of a relationship that would continue to grow over time. "Thank you for everything," Siala said, hugging Ayana tightly. "Thank you for helping Nasha, and for helping me and for promising to teach me more." "Thank you for reminding me why this work matters," Ayana replied, her own eyes moist with emotion. "Helping you and Nasha has reminded me that healing is not just about curing sickness, but about bringing lost souls home, whether they are living or dead." 2 years had passed since that first desperate journey to Ayana's canyon, and the changes in the family were remarkable. Siala had grown taller and stronger, her face bright with the confidence that came from understanding her unique gifts rather than fearing them. True to their promise, the family had returned every summer, with Siala spending weeks learning traditional healing ways under Ayana's patient guidance. The child had proven to be an exceptional student, absorbing knowledge about medicinal plants, spiritual protection, and traditional Apache healing practices with an enthusiasm that delighted her elderly teacher. More importantly, she had learned to manage her spiritual sensitivity, no longer vulnerable to unwanted possession, but able to help confused spirits find their way to peace. On this particular summer morning, Nalnish found himself watching his daughter and Ayana work together in the herb garden they had planted behind the house. The two moved with an easy familiarity, the old woman's weathered hands guiding the young girl's eager fingers as they carefully harvested morning glory seeds for a purification ceremony. "She has your patience," Chenoa observed, joining her husband in the doorway. "I never thought I would see Siala sit still long enough to learn such detailed work, but with Ayana she can focus for hours." Nalnish nodded, marveling at the transformation in his daughter. The frightened, disconnected child who had brought them to this canyon 2 years ago had become a confident young healer in training. More than that, she had brought healing to their entire family by helping them reconnect with their Apache heritage in ways they had never expected. "Ayana has become like a grandmother to her," he said quietly. "I think this place has become as much home to Siala as our house in White River." As if hearing her name, Siala looked up from her work and waved enthusiastically at her parents. "Come see what we found," she called out. "There is a whole patch of desert sage that was not here last year. Ayana says the spirits brought it because they know we need it for the ceremonies we have been doing." The ceremonies Siala referred to had become a regular part of their summer visits. Word had somehow spread among the Apache communities about Ayana's successful treatment of Siala's spiritual possession, and other families had begun making the journey to the canyon seeking help for similar problems. Siala, under Ayana's careful supervision, had assisted with several of these cases, her natural ability to see and communicate with spirits proving invaluable. Each time she helps a lost spirit find peace, she grows stronger in her own power, Ayana had explained to the parents. This is how true healers are made, not just through book learning but through practical experience guided by wisdom. The most recent case had been particularly challenging. A teenage boy from a neighboring reservation had been experiencing violent nightmares and aggressive behavior that doctors could not explain. When his family brought him to Ayana, she and Siala had discovered that he was being influenced by the angry spirit of a warrior who had died in battle more than a century ago. The warrior spirit was trapped by his own rage, Siala had explained to her parents after the successful healing. He could not rest because he was still fighting the battle in his mind. We had to help him remember that the war was over and his people were safe now. Such experiences had matured Siala beyond her years, giving her a deep understanding of human nature and spiritual realities that most adults never developed. Yet she remained fundamentally a child, still delighting in simple pleasures like chasing lizards in the desert sun or listening to Ayana's stories about the old days. This morning, however, brought an unexpected development that would change everything. As the family worked together in the garden, they heard the sound of an approaching vehicle, unusual in this remote location. Soon a tribal police car appeared on the rough desert road, followed by another vehicle carrying several men in business suits. Ayana rose slowly from her gardening, her expression growing cautious. In her experience, visits from official representatives rarely brought good news. "Stay close to me, little star," she murmured to Ciala, who had also noticed the serious expressions on the visitors' faces. The lead official, a middle-aged Apache man wearing a badge that identified him as a tribal council member, approached with obvious reluctance. "Grandmother Ayana," he said respectfully, "I am sorry to disturb you, but we have received complaints about unauthorized healing practices being conducted on tribal land." The words hit the family like a physical blow. They had known that some people in the community disapproved of traditional healing, preferring to rely solely on modern medical approaches, but they had not expected official interference with Ayana's work. "What kind of complaints?" Nalnish asked, stepping forward protectively. "Some families have reported that their children are being exposed to primitive and potentially harmful spiritual practices," one of the suited men replied. "There are concerns about psychological damage and interference with proper medical treatment." Ayana's face remained calm, but Ciala could see the pain in her eyes. After decades of helping people, the old healer was being accused of causing harm. "I have never prevented anyone from seeking medical treatment," Ayana said quietly. "I work alongside doctors, not against them." "Nevertheless," the tribal council member continued, "we are going to have to ask you to stop conducting healing ceremonies involving minors. There are liability issues, and some people feel that traditional practices should not be imposed on children who cannot fully understand what they are agreeing to." The silence that followed was heavy with shock and disappointment. Ciala looked from Ayana to her parents, trying to understand how something so beautiful and helpful could suddenly be forbidden. "What about all the families we have helped?" she asked, her young voice clear in the desert air. "What about the spirits who are still lost and need someone to help them cross over?" The officials looked uncomfortable at being questioned by a child, but the tribal council member answered gently, "Those concerns will have to be addressed through other means, young lady. Perhaps counseling or medical intervention. But counseling cannot help a spirit find its way home," Ciala protested, her eyes filling with tears of frustration. "And medicine cannot heal something that is not physically wrong." Seeing his daughter's distress, Nalnish felt something shift inside him. For too long, he had been caught between two worlds, never fully committing to either traditional or modern ways. But watching Ciala's passionate defense of the healing work that had saved her life, he realized that some battles were worth fighting. With respect, he said to the officials, "My daughter was dying before Ayana helped her. Not physically dying, but spiritually dying. No doctor could explain what was wrong with her, and no medicine could cure her. If traditional healing had not saved her, we would have lost her completely." "That may be true in your case," the suited man replied, "but we cannot make exceptions based on individual success stories. The policy must be applied uniformly." Chenoa stepped forward, her voice strong with conviction. "Then we will challenge the policy. My daughter has the right to learn her ancestors' healing ways, and families have the right to seek traditional help when modern medicine fails them." The confrontation continued for another hour, with neither side willing to compromise. Finally, the officials departed, leaving the family and Ayana to contemplate an uncertain future. The immediate effect was clear. Ayana would have to stop conducting healing ceremonies involving children, at least on tribal land. That evening, as they sat around the fire outside Ayana's house, the family grappled with the implications of the day's events. The old healer seemed smaller somehow, aged by the weight of seeing her life's work questioned and restricted. "I am too old to fight bureaucrats," she said sadly. "Perhaps it is time for me to step back and let others carry on the healing traditions." "No," Ciala said firmly, surprising everyone with the determination in her voice. "You cannot stop helping people just because some officials do not understand. The spirits who need crossing over do not care about policies and liability. They only care about finding peace." Looking at his daughter's fierce expression, Nalnish realized that their journey to this canyon 2 years ago had led to something much larger than just healing one child. It had awakened a calling that would not be easily suppressed by bureaucratic interference. "What if we found another way?" he asked slowly. "What if we established a place where traditional healing could continue, but in a way that satisfied the legal concerns?" As they talked late into the night, a new vision began to emerge. Instead of fighting the restrictions, they would work around them. They would create a legitimate organization dedicated to preserving traditional Apache healing knowledge, with proper documentation and legal protections. Ayana's wisdom would not be lost, but would be shared with a new generation of healers who could carry the traditions forward. It will take time, Chinoa warned, and it will require convincing people who do not believe in traditional ways. Then that is what we will do, Ciala declared with the absolute certainty that only children possess. We will show them that the old ways still have power to heal, and we will make sure that no lost spirit ever has to wait centuries for help again. Looking at his daughter's determined face in the firelight, Nalnish felt a deep pride mixed with amazement. Somehow, in seeking healing for his child, he had discovered that she was destined to become a healer herself. The Apache hunter who had once sought Ayana's help had found not just healing but a new purpose. When his child had embraced the old woman's teachings, he had indeed found his way home, to a heritage and calling he had never fully understood before.